How would it feel if a plane suddenly vanished into thin air right after takeoff, only to land at an airport 37 years later? You might find it hard to believe, but this is exactly what supposedly happened to Flight 914. This was no ordinary incident. It was an event that shocked the entire world. We're talking about Douglas DC-4 Pan American Flight 914, which departed from New York for Miami on July 2, 1955. But it never reached its destination.
It was 7 a.m. Crowds were gradually gathering at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Passengers were busy boarding, some preparing to step onto the plane, while others stood outside chatting. There were a total of 57 passengers and 4 crew members on board, and everything seemed perfectly normal. The plane was commanded by Captain Charles G. Taylor, who was in his seat checking all the instruments. It was a short, routine flight bound for Miami, Florida, scheduled to arrive in just about 3 hours. The weather was clear, the plane had no issues, and everything was under control.
The flight took off at exactly 9:55 a.m. Within a few minutes, it left New York's skyscrapers behind and reached over the Atlantic Ocean. The passengers were relaxed. Some were looking out the window, some reading newspapers, and others talking excitedly about reaching Miami. But no one knew that in the next few minutes, their lives were going to change forever.
At 10:12 a.m., New York Air Traffic Control tracked Flight 914 and reported that the plane was on the correct path. Everything was going smoothly, just like any other day. But at 10:15 a.m., something bizarre happened. Flight 914 suddenly disappeared from the radar screen. It vanished in the blink of an eye, as if it had dissolved into thin air. The air traffic control officers were stunned. They immediately tried to establish contact with the aircraft. Flight 914, do you copy? But there was no response. They tried again. Flight 914, please respond. Still, silence. They continued their attempts repeatedly, but no answer came from Flight 914. Chaos erupted at New York Air Traffic Control. Initially, the officers thought it might be a technical glitch, but when they tracked other flights, everything else was normal. Only Flight 914 was missing. Miami Air Traffic Control was immediately notified that Flight 914 had suddenly vanished from the radar. By this time, the plane should have arrived at its destination, but it hadn't. A massive search and rescue operation was launched immediately. Navy vessels began searching the ocean for any sign of wreckage. Other airlines were also contacted to ask if they had spotted anything unusual in the sky, but there was no trace. After extensive searching yielded nothing, Pan American Airlines issued a statement. Flight 914, with 57 passengers and 4 crew members, had mysteriously gone missing. They had searched every possible location, but found no wreckage. It was deeply regretted, but the plane was presumed lost in an accident. A massive search and rescue operation was launched immediately. Navy vessels began searching the ocean for any sign of wreckage. Other airlines were also contacted to ask if they had spotted anything unusual in the sky, but there was no trace. After extensive searching yielded nothing, Pan American Airlines issued a statement. Flight 914, with 57 passengers and 4 crew members, had mysteriously gone missing. They had searched every possible location, but found no wreckage. It was deeply regretted, but the plane was presumed lost in an accident. But the question remained, did the plane really crash? Or was it trapped in another time and space? This question was on everyone's mind, but no one had an answer. Decades passed. Then, nearly 37 years later, in 1992, an event occurred that no one could believe. People had almost forgotten about Flight 914, which went missing in 1955. It had been written off as a tragic accident, and the passengers were declared dead. Nobody talked about this flight anymore. But on September 21, 1992, something happened at Caracas Airport in Venezuela that left everyone there completely dumbfounded. Caracas Airport Air Traffic Control was busy with its daily routine. Every flight was being monitored and everything was normal. But suddenly, an unknown aircraft signal appeared on the radar screen. Juan de la Corte, the officer on duty, stared closely at the screen and saw a plane heading directly toward Caracas. However, they had no official flight plan or records for it. He immediately called his colleagues and asked, "What plane is this? We have no flight details for it." When the aircraft's model was identified after a quick investigation, amazement and fear washed over everyone's faces. They realized it wasn't a modern aircraft, but a 1950s Douglas DC-4. Uproar broke out in the control tower. The control tower immediately contacted the unidentified plane. "Unknown aircraft, please identify yourself." For a few seconds, there was no response. Everyone in the control tower was anxious. Just then, a crackling voice came over the radio. "This is Pan American Flight 914, en route from New York to Miami. Have we arrived in Miami?" Hearing these words, Juan de la Corte and the other officers were utterly shocked. With a trembling voice, he replied, "This is not Miami. This is Caracas Airport in Venezuela." This meant Flight 914 was over 2,200 kilometers away from its destination, and the pilot had no idea that they had landed at Caracas Airport 37 years into the future. When the pilot heard that he was in Caracas instead of Miami, he panicked and requested permission to land. Air traffic control cleared the aircraft for landing immediately. As soon as permission was granted, the pilot touched down at Caracas Airport.
But the view outside left the pilot completely bewildered. The other planes at the airport looked incredibly sleek and modern. The buildings and the people around also looked strange to him. The airport ground crew was equally shocked. Everyone stared at the vintage plane in disbelief. It looked as if a World War II-era aircraft had just landed in front of them.
Where Flight 914 went after that remains a mystery. To this day, it has neither arrived in Miami nor has any trace of its passengers been found. Interestingly, the piece of paper that fell from the pilot's hand turned out to be a calendar page from the year 1955, which some claim proves the incident was 100% true. But the question remains, if this really happened, where was a plane that took off in 1955 for 37 years? This story sounds like a sci-fi movie. While some people believe it is completely true, others consider it a purely fictional tale. The mystery of Flight 914 has fascinated people for decades, backed by numerous urban legends and alleged witnesses. However, no concrete evidence has ever been found. According to some investigative reports, the story originated in the 1980s when an American tabloid newspaper published it. It is widely said that the story is entirely fabricated and holds no official record. Many experts claim that Flight 914 never even existed, and no such incident was ever recorded at Caracas Airport. So where did this story come from? Was it just a fabricated rumor that grew more mysterious over time? Or is the real truth hidden deep within some classified file? No one knows the truth for sure, but one thing is certain. The mystery of Flight 914 continues to fascinate people today, and likely will for generations to come.
What do you think? Will Flight 914 ever return to Earth again, just as it allegedly did after 37 years in 1992? Or is it just a fictional myth? Let us know your valuable thoughts in the comments. Also, don't forget to comment on how you liked this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. To watch interesting and informative videos like this regularly, subscribe to our channel Urdut Bangla right now. Thank you, everyone.